being really fearless is a wonderful way to achieve the things you want to achieve. And I also want to caveat that people will only see the success stories. Oh, she built this White House team. She has this podcast. She has this book. They don't know the denominator, right? So they don't know all the things I tried, all the cold emails I sent that no one ever responded to, the hundreds of times I was told no at the White House. I was told no so many times. Like the number of doors I had to knock on, the amount of organic support I had to generate without a mandate or a budget to make this team happen. But I just kept doing it. I kept with it. I think maybe the grit I built as a violinist was something that helped me in those moments when I kept being told no.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to How She Does It, where we meet talented women who have built impactful lives, and we ask them how they do it. I'm Karen Feinerman. I'm a longtime Wall Street investor, a mom of four, and a panelist on CNBC's Fast Money. Change is inevitable, and sometimes its arrival is unwelcome. A scary health diagnosis, the end of a relationship, the loss of a job, or the end of a dream. What makes it worse is that it's often hard to see exactly what our new life will look like afterwards. It's something our guest, Dr. Maya Shankar, knows all too well. You may know her best as the creator and host of the award-winning podcast, A Slight Change of Plans. She's just released her first book called The Other Side of Change: Who We Become When Life Makes Other Plans. In it, she weaves together her riveting personal story, research-based strategies and insights, along with in-depth interviews with people who've experienced their own life upheavals. Maya graduated from Yale, was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, and did a postdoctoral fellowship at Stanford. She served as a senior policy advisor in the Obama White House, and her current day job is Senior Director of Behavioral Economics at Google. Maya and I chatted about the major shifts she's encountered in her life and what she's learned, her advice for navigating change, and why she is a big believer in the cold call. I know you'll find something useful for your life in our conversation. I know I did. Enjoy. Maya Shankar, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for spending the time.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Karen. This is such a pleasure.
So to prepare for this interview, I was very happy to read your book, The Other Side of Change. Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you so much.
But I understand you hesitated to write the book. Why?
Writing a book was just never anything on my list of things, on my bucket list. And I was so happy hosting my podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, and just living my life. And I didn't really feel like I had something to say in a book yet when I first started on this venture of exploring change. And then something happened, which was after about maybe 50 or 60 interviews of the podcast, I started to notice that there were these really fascinating intersections between people's stories that didn't look at all the same on their surface. So, for example, the cancer patient and the woman whose husband had cheated on her were both grappling with a feeling of betrayal. And there were just time and time again, these psychological universalities that transcended specific circumstances and really unified our experiences of change. And as a result of that, I was so excited by the idea of exploring this hypothesis, right? Like maybe because we have a shared psychology, maybe because the challenges we face when uncertainty comes our way and we're having to grapple with the world's unfairness or the loss of a dream or grief over a life we once had, anxiety about what the future holds. If the problem statement was the same, then maybe the solution set was the same too. And so I wrote The Other Side of Change to give us a manual of sorts so that when we are navigating changes of any kind, we have a resource of powerful stories, science-backed strategies to actually come out the other side with a renewed sense of self and a greater sense of possibility.
I thought that was so interesting that you take these very different scenarios and yet come up with these similar ways to approach them. But let's go to your story, your slight change of plans. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was an aspiring concert violinist as a young kid. I was studying at Juilliard under the amazing, incredible violinist Itzhak Perlman, and I had big dreams of becoming a professional one day. And then, as you alluded to, I had my slight change of plans. I overextended my pinky finger just playing a single note, and I tore and then damaged tendons in my hand. And doctors eventually told me that this was a career ending injury. And as you can imagine, Karen, at this point in my life, I was 15, but I'd spent almost 10 years of my life devoted to this craft. And so I was so grief stricken. And there was something really curious about my grief, which was that I didn't just feel like I was grieving the loss of the instrument. I felt like I was grieving the loss of myself in this much more foundational way. And it's taken me decades to reflect on this experience, but I really do think that one of the things that makes change so challenging to navigate is that it can threaten our self-identity. And one lesson that I learned from that, and I hope is helpful to anyone who's listening, is that we can be far more resilient in the face of change if we can learn to define our identities not simply by what we do, but by why we do that thing. So, to make this concrete, I asked myself, well, what did you love about the violin? And it turns out that at its core, emotional connection was the reason that I fell in love with music. It was a vehicle for me to feel close with my fellow humans, whether it was audience members or my fellow musicians. And in discovering that that was the root of my passion, I realized that, oh, just because I lost the violin didn't mean that I lost what led me to love it in the first place. That part of Maya was actually still very much intact. That part was not threatened. And so then the exercise became, well, through what other outlets can I find ways to express this need that I have to forge emotional connections with other people? And that can be a lifeline for people who are going through change, right? If you can identify what your why is, whether it's service or enjoying the thrill of improving at a craft or having a creative outlet, then when life makes other plans and takes away your what, the particular pursuit, you will have a soft landing because you will know that actually this why can be a compass. It can guide you towards your next steps and it can help you figure out how to still express this. And for me, it's been in the form of hosting A Slight Change of Plans, writing The Other Side of Change. I'm still able to feed this deep love of human connection through those enterprises, even though, I no longer can play music.
Mm-hmm. One of the parts of your story where you're sort of in this interim of whether or not you can play music, right? You had some period of maybe hoping that you could. Can you tell us about
Absolutely.
that period?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, imagine my mental state at the time, right? I was going to be in denial, like fighting the doctor's recommendations and just assuming that I was going to get back on the horse and everything was going to be fine. I was also really stubborn. I was like, I will find a way to work through this injury. And I think it was only over time that it became very clear that the pain was not going away. The inflammation was still there. I had surgeries. I did alternative treatments. I took an ungodly amount of anti-inflammatories during that time, and nothing was working. And actually, I learned in writing my book that there is some advantage to short-term denial. Denial gets a really bad rap, but the science says that in the shorter term, it can be a huge source of motivation and can help prevent you from the depths of despair to have some degree of denial. But then, of course, in the longer term, denial is problematic. And so at some point, doctors did tell me, like, okay, kid, dream's over. You need to figure out how to pivot because you're not going to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm. One of the points in your book that seems really helpful is this uncertainty being far more painful than certainty of something bad.
Yeah, I'm curious if you resonate with this. Our brains are not wired to enjoy uncertainty. And
Yes.
I can tell you for sure, my brain is definitely not wired to like uncertainty. I really suck at any ambiguity, all of the anxiety that comes with an uncertain future. And one of my favorite research studies shows that we are more stressed when we're told we have a 50% chance of getting an electric shock than when we're told we have a 100% chance. And
I found that fascinating. And it
right?
does resonate. My day job is different than yours. I'm an investor. And I always say the market hates uncertainty. The market would rather know what is the bad news, and we will work around it and price that in. But we can't deal with the uncertainty. We don't know how to function.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm a senior director of behavioral economics at Google. That's my day job. And it's so interesting because when I joined Google about 9 years ago, I remember getting advice from my brother who had been a software engineer at Google for, I think at that point, like 20 years. he's like, Maya, how's it going? Big brother, just counseling little sister. I said, oh, it's okay. I mean, I think I'm starting to find, this was maybe 6 or 7 months, and I think I'm slowly starting to find my bearings. And I'm just waiting for things to like settle down and feel really secure. And he laughed and he's like, okay, that's hilarious. Your job is to actually become comfortable working in this environment, knowing that it is an ever shifting landscape. You have to be comfortable knowing that at any moment there will be a reorg. At any moment, the state of technology will shift in our world. And that will be the only way for you to hope to thrive in this company, but then also, more importantly, have some semblance of mental health and to preserve your sanity. And that was such wonderful advice because I stopped searching for that moment of clarity and closure and like, okay, now it all makes sense. And now I get what I'm doing. And I just sort of was a little bit more open to the unbidden, as they say.
All right. So going back to your adjustment period then. So finally you realize, okay, that dream is over. How do you then decide what your next dream is?
Yeah, it can be really hard at these inflection points because if you, so much of your identity and self-confidence is wrapped up in one pursuit, then what do you even pivot to? And I was college bound and I was thinking I was going to major in music performance or something like that. And now I'm opening the course catalog and I'm like, oh gosh, like, should I try to be a history major? Like, I just felt so lost. And then my dad gave me really good advice. He said, you essentially have to act like an explorer this summer. This was the summer before college. You've been wearing blinders for the last 10 years effectively, right? Because your entire world was music. And so now what you have to do is take off the blinders and expose yourself to as many ideas and conversations, topics that you can in the world over these next few months. And he's like, read books, watch documentaries, talk to people, ask them about their lives, ask them what they study. And he said, most importantly, do that without a specific goal in mind. And I'm so glad, by the way, he gave me that advice because I didn't even know there was such thing as a cognitive science major. I wasn't familiar with that discipline. And so long story short, I was just in my parents' basement and I stumbled upon an old book that my sister had used in one of her college classes, The Language Instinct by Steven Pinker. And it details our brain's remarkable ability to both produce and comprehend language. And it was a skill that I had totally taken for granted at that point. And I found myself marveling at the complex machinery that was operating behind the scenes to give rise to this incredible ability. And that just lit up my imagination. My dad's a physicist. What's behind my dad's ability to do complex math? What's behind falling in love? How do we make decisions? What's going on in the brain when we do that? And so, my imagination's kind of running wild about all these questions to ask. And I discovered that there's a major called cognitive science and it's interdisciplinary. It calls from fields like psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy, linguistics, computer science. I just fell in love with cognitive science and I was the overeager freshman who was trying to get into, monkey labs and to do original research. I still remember going into that class because everyone wanted to do monkey lab, right? They all wanted to have that experience. And I was the lowly freshman in the back row and the class was already at capacity. And I just remember writing a note to the professor and was like, hey, I'm Maya. I'm a freshman. I have no background in this space at all, but I'm super excited. And I will take the 5 a.m. shifts on Saturdays in New Haven and go to the monkey lab if you take me on. And, you can have anything you want from me for the rest of my life because I was just so committed. And
I got to ask, when you say the monkey lab, this is actually a monkey lab.
Yeah, a lab with monkeys and you run cognition experiments on monkeys. But yeah, we would ask things about what does cognition look like in the absence of language? Do monkeys have, quote, theory of mind? Do they have the ability to understand what another person might be thinking, even if their behaviors are different? And it was just, it was such a fascinating time.
I love that you had the sort of, sense of self or whatever it is to just say, hey, I'm a freshman. What can I do? Good for you.
Well, I think I learned that in part from my mom. So we talked about my being a violinist, but actually the entrance into Juilliard was not a foregone conclusion for me. So when I was 9, I'd been studying violin for about 3 years at this point, and my mom started to realize, wow, my daughter has big dreams, and I don't have any musical connections. Like, how do we pull this off? I never learned proper technique, and it was all very unorthodox in terms of training. And so I remember one day I had my violin with me and we were at the entrance of the Juilliard School in New York and we were just walking by and my mom goes, "Why don't we just go in?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "What's the worst thing that can happen?" And I'm thinking, security guards, that's one bad thing that can happen. But, early 90s, people were a little more chill. And we walked through, and the guards were so gracious. My mom was basically just like, "This is my daughter's dream school. Like, do you mind if we go in?" And my mom struck up a conversation with a violinist and her mom. And this girl was studying at Juilliard. And my mom simply said, "Would you mind introducing us to your teacher when you're done with your lesson today?" You have to be pretty gutsy to do something like that. I was like, okay, of course. I'm probably like super embarrassed while all of this is going down. But the kindness of strangers, Karen, they
Mhm.
said yes. And within an hour, I was auditioning on the spot for this teacher at Juilliard. And I remember him saying something like, okay, she's not ready now. She doesn't have the technical foundation, but I think she has potential. I'll take her on for a 5-week boot camp this summer and try to get her to the point where she might be ready. And I just worked my little tail off that summer. And that's honestly, it was my mom creating the silver platter when life doesn't just hand it to you. That is the reason I even got into Juilliard that fall. People who know the story have called it my mom's Juilliard cold call method. And I've used that so many times in my life. My job at the White House, the Obama White House, which followed, doing a PhD and then a postdoc, came from me sending a cold email to an Obama advisor. And again, kindness of strangers, like they will help you make connections sometimes. And in my case, I was not just asking for a connection. I was saying I'd like to create a new job.
Yeah. So, what was your pitch?
Yeah. So, I'm passionate, just to catch people up. So, I'm passionate about cognitive science. I've done the PhD, I've done the postdoc. And then I have this kind of oh crap moment where I'm sitting in the basement of an fMRI laboratory at Stanford. There's no windows. And I've been scanning people's brains for hours. And I'm like, uh-oh, this is not a good fit for my personality. I don't actually know if the research life is right for me. I tend to be more social. I like working on teams. I like seeing immediate impact. It's just harder in an academic climate to achieve those goals, right? And so I called up this advisor, the same one who took a chance on me and let me do the monkey lab. And I said to her, "I'm so sorry. I know you've invested in me, but I'm about to jump ship. I'm going to try to maybe become a management consultant or something. But thank you for all your help." And she's like, "Okay, okay, okay. Slow your roll, Maya. Let's talk this through." So my advisor said she had just been to a conference in which she heard Cass Sunstein, who's a Harvard law professor, talk about efforts that had happened in the Obama administration. And in this particular case, the government offers a free lunch program for low income students. And despite the fact it was offered to millions of kids were still going hungry every day because they hadn't been signed up for the program. And they did a behavioral audit of the program and discovered that there were many psychological barriers and other barriers that were in the way of families signing up. So the first was that there was a stigma. It's just an uncomfortable situation to be in to have to proactively sign your kid up for this program. And then there was another barrier, which was that it was a very burdensome form to fill out. And so what the government did is it leveraged a very elegant principle from behavioral economics, which is what I was studying in my postdoc, which is the power of the default option. So they changed the program from an opt-in program to an
Hmm.
opt-out program. So now parents only had to take an affirmative step if they actively wanted to unenroll their kids from the school lunch program.
That makes so much more sense.
Yeah, it led to 12.5 million more kids now eating lunch at school every day, which
Mhm.
was remarkable.
So, let me just ask, how were you actually able to land a job in the Obama administration?
Yeah, so I hear this story and I think, oh my God, this is what I want to be doing, right? I want to be applying insights from these research disciplines into improvements in people's lives, ideally into improvements in public policy. And so my advisor from undergrad gives me Cass Sunstein's email address and says, go send an email. So I send this cold email, and I remember just for name recognition, I put my advisor's name in the subject line because I was like, I want him to at least open it. And I said, "Hey, Cass, I'm Maya. I'm a postdoc. I have no public policy experience. I've probably published nothing of significance to you, but I'm really eager to work at this intersection of policy and science." And I remember kind of limiting myself in the email. I wrote in parentheses, "I know I'm not cool enough to work with the likes of Obama, but if there's a state or local government opportunity, I'm super game for that. And fortunately for me, Cass ignored that parenthetical and wrote back and simply said, here's the president's science advisor's email. Just send him a note. Let him know I passed you along. And it was crazy because within 2 days, I was being interviewed for this hypothetical job that I was pitching to them, which is I think we should have a dedicated role for a behavioral scientist. Oh, and by the way, I think you should hire me for that role. And so, yeah, for about an hour and a half, I was pitching them on why I thought this role was so promising. And I'm so glad that they greenlit it because it was just the most incredible 4 years.
So I'm sort of curious, while you're pitching that, are you saying, oh my God, Maya, I can't believe I'm actually here, and this is a meeting that's actually happening, while you're also doing something that you passionately believe could be helpful?
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm feeling all of the insecurity, imposter, like, is this real life? Let me pinch myself. One lesson I've learned is when I get a little bit self-conscious about putting myself forward, I try to channel a lot of my enthusiasm and passion for the cause that I'm putting forward. So if I'm feeling that imposter syndrome, I'm like, okay, you might not believe in yourself in this moment, but you do believe in the power of behavioral science and applying that to policy. Just lean into that piece and advocate for that. And that way I don't do too much of that self-limiting stuff.
You do or don't feel any imposter syndrome?
Oh, of course I do. All the
Mm-hmm.
time. I felt imposter syndrome every time I entered a new environment. I mean, you would think, oh my gosh, she gets into Juilliard. She feels really good. No, I didn't. I felt unbelievably intimidated by the quality of music being performed by my peers. And it's like, oh, she gets, now it's that Perlman takes her on. I felt even more imposter syndrome when that happened because now my peer group is like the elite of the elite. I think he took on 5 students. The 4 students that are not me went on to become internationally renowned professional violinists, right? So I have felt insecurity, obviously, because I'm a normal person at every turn. And you can imagine when I stepped into the White House that first day, I was like, what have I gotten myself into?
Okay, so Maya, though, your resume is sort of extraordinary. So Juilliard, okay, so then you go to Yale, right? And then you go to Oxford, then Stanford. If you saw that resume without your name on it, would you say, imposter?
I just think you don't know what's happening behind the scenes for a person. And I imagine a lot of people who have resumes that are impressive on their surface, they have absolutely had imposter syndrome. And if they didn't, I would actually be a little bit concerned. I think humility is our friend. And there's really compelling research showing that when you do have imposter syndrome, you're more curious, you're more open minded, you recognize you might be wrong, you recognize all the time that you have things to learn and that you can't be overly confident. And I think those are all really good things. I do think over time, though, I have built confidence that being really fearless is a wonderful way to achieve the things you want to achieve. And I also want to caveat that people will only see the success stories. Oh, she built this White House team. She has this podcast. She has this book. They don't know the denominator, right? So they don't know all the things I tried, all the cold emails I sent that no one ever responded to, the hundreds of times I was told no at the White House. My goal when I joined was to build a dedicated behavioral science team that could outlast me. And it actually still does exist in a very bipartisan part of government that's dedicated to just efficient, effective, cost-saving programs. I was told no so many times. Like the number of doors I had to knock on, the amount of organic support I had to generate without a mandate or a budget to make this team happen. But I just kept doing it. I kept with it. I think maybe the grit I'd built as a violinist was something that helped me in those moments when I kept being told no.
That is an excellent answer. I was just thinking about it just for a second, the other way around, that whatever is innate in you that has that sort of impetus to, keep trying, is what made you a great violinist, not the other way around.
Yeah, no, we don't know the direction of causality here. You're totally right. And look, we all have limitations as people, but we all have potential as people. And I think the goal in life is to just figure out where that potential is and to just lean in wherever you find it. My dad's a physicist, as I mentioned. I don't have aptitude for physics. It wouldn't have mattered if I was really passionate about the topic. That wasn't going to be my future. That's okay, right? So you have to engage in some degree of radical self-acceptance as well. And then you just go to the spaces where you're like, okay, I think there's a combination of deep passion and some aptitude. We can make this work.
For the book, Maya, you spoke with people who have faced some incredible life challenges, difficult health issues, incarceration, major job challenges. Olivia, tell us her story.
Oh my gosh. When I heard from Olivia, she actually just sent me a message on Instagram, Karen. It was so funny. Yeah, she was like, "Hey, I know about your podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, and at some point I would just love to, share my story with you." And then she told me how she had had a brain stem stroke in her early 20s and it ended up with locked-in syndrome, which for those who are listening who don't know, is a lot of people's worst nightmare. All of your cognition's preserved, your body's functioning, but you have no ability to voluntarily move any of the muscles in your body except for the muscles controlling your eyes. And so your only portal for communicating with the world is by blinking. So Olivia sends me this message. And, I'm like, hey, are you free in like 30 seconds to take a phone call with me? I probably like freaked her out. I was like, so instead of being on my podcast, how about you spend the next 3.5 years talking to me about your story? Because it was so exceptional. I knew that this had to be in the book. And it actually is the first chapter of the book. And the thing that I enjoyed so much about writing The Other Side of Change is that the stories are exceptional, but the lessons contained within them are universal. And so you would think, oh, Olivia's story is going to be about determination and hard work in the face of a challenging diagnosis. Actually, no. It turns out Olivia was a people pleaser, almost pathologically, before all this. And the biggest issue she struggled with after being locked in was that she could no longer curate a version of herself that would impress the people she wanted to impress in her life. And it is actually a story of incredible and beautiful self acceptance where she initially thinks that she will only reclaim happiness if she can have a full and speedy recovery back to exactly who she'd been before. And she has an incredible recovery, but it's not back to who she was before. She still has lots of limitations, but she is more contented and self satisfied than she's ever been in her life. And she said to me, I'm not sure I would ever have gotten to this place had it not been for the changes I went through to get to this place of self assurance. I mean, she's in her late 20s, and I, as a 40-year-old, envy her self confidence, Karen. I mean, it's incredible. And I think that the hardest moments in our lives, they do test us, but they also reveal things to us that might be holding us back. And yeah, I just love it when someone's interior life, what's going on in their minds, is not at all what you would have thought, when you first hear about their story.
Yeah, that story was really, because you're right, it is people's greatest fear. And to hear someone go through it is just amazing.
Yeah. One of the things that I do in the book is I talk about many concrete strategies people can use when they feel that life has closed many doors for them and it's very hard for them to envision a promising future in this newly constrained environment. I wanted to give people techniques they could use to reimagine what is possible for them. And I talk about things like moral elevation, which is actually exposing ourselves to other people's extraordinary actions as a way of cracking open our own imagination. I talk about reading fiction, which can be an identity laboratory. I talk about how all the skills and experiences and knowledge that we built over the course of our lives will in fact serve us as we enter this next chapter. It's not like you lost all of that just because you lost a job or you're moving jobs or any other twist of fate. And so it was really important for me to give people a renewed sense of optimism and possibility about what their futures could look like in the face of a big change.
So the podcast, A Slight Change of Plans, what have those conversations given you?
A profound amount of hope, actually, because I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that we can forget at the outset of a change when we're feeling really daunted and feel like we're incapable of getting to the other side, that the big changes in our lives change us. That when a big unexpected thing happens to us, it actually leads to lasting change within us. We emerge on the other side with new capabilities and perspectives and values and beliefs. Because we will become different people on the other side, that's a source of optimism. It means that if I don't feel prepared in this moment, I can remind myself that this future version of Maya with new abilities and new perspectives might very well be able to handle this change, and maybe in spades. And I think the people in my book have said very honestly, they would never will their change to happen. I mean, who would invite illness or heartbreak into their lives? But they are deeply grateful for the person they became as a result of what they went through. Mm-hmm. And the final chapter unexpectedly became memoir. I talk about my own changes that I was going through as I was writing this book, which was deep challenges trying to start a family with my husband, and heartbreaks and pregnancy losses with our surrogate, and just reckoning with all of that. And to witness myself transform as a result of these heartbreaks in ways that I'm so grateful for was so unexpected and made me believe this message, because I'm skeptical, right? If I hear there's a silver lining, I'm like, really?
So tell us your story of who you thought you were, how you imagined yourself, and how that changed.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's still a work in progress, right? I'm still working
Mhm.
through all this, but the earliest identity I've ever had was aspiring mom. I always wanted to be a mom. There's videos of me as a little kid, 4 or 5, having conversations with my fictitious neighbors about my rambunctious kids. And it's been unexpected for me to navigate a world now where, after many trials and tribulations, I am child free in this moment. And I remember that when we heard we had lost identical twin girls, this was the second pregnancy loss, I really did feel like it was a deep threat to my identity. And I mentioned that change can serve as a moment of revelation for us, right? And in this particular case, I realized so much of my self worth was wrapped up in one day becoming a mom because of cultural influences, growing up maybe in an Indian American family, also messages from pop culture about a woman's worth in this society. I mean, there's a lot of problematic messaging, there's a lot of stigma. I had come to believe that without that, I was incapable of feeling whole, right? Like a full person. And my evolution is actually getting to the point where I am now, even child free today, like a happier, healthier, more hopeful person than I've ever been. And I could never have seen that coming. And I do credit the people I spent years interviewing about their changes with to allow myself to have this internal evolution. I mean, it was kind of operating behind the scenes outside of my conscious awareness. And then I kind of realized when I was writing that final chapter, wow, my views have changed radically. And I don't know what the future holds, but it is very empowering and freeing to know that for the first time ever, I can envision a very full and happy child free life. And for whatever reasons, I hadn't been able to do that before.
Well, there's one really beautiful part of that chapter where you're devastated. You just lost the twin girls, and your husband Jimmy says, "Let's write down what you're thankful for."
So he came into the bedroom and was like, my is his pet name for me. Like, let's just say a few things we're grateful for. And I was like, dude, I do not want to do this right now. This is so annoying. I feel like crap. You go do the gratitude exercise. Keep me posted, okay? But I'm not doing this. And then he kind of wore me down. And he actually engaged me in what's known as a self affirmation exercise without realizing it. So, a self affirmation exercise, I would encourage everyone who's listening to do this really quickly. It's just 5 minutes. You write down all of the identities and parts of your life that you find deep meaning and value in that are not threatened by the change you're going through. So, if you're in a rough patch in your relationship, you might focus on your spiritual life. If you're having a tough go at it at work, you might focus on the amazing community that you have in the town that you live. And what an affirmation exercise does is that it reminds you that you have this multifaceted, multidimensional existence. And it kind of takes the pressure off of this one identity that you were really laser focused on. And so the way that that unfolded for me was I started to rattle off my list, right? I was like, well, I'm so grateful to be an aunt to my 6 nieces and nephews. I'm so glad that I've been working with the same people for over a decade and that we are such good friends and we love working together. How extraordinary is it that I get to work with some of my best friends? I love my workouts with my trainer on Zoom, and we talk about The Bachelor and Love is Blind. And I love hosting a slight change of plans. It's such a joy, to be able to talk to people from all over the world about their experiences. And as I did this, I felt something really meaningful shift within me, which was that I had been so laser focused on achieving this goal. I'm sure a lot of listeners can relate to this feeling of being so single mindedly focused on achieving a goal that they lose sight of the rest of their lives. And I had become so zeroed in on this dream of motherhood that I had failed to have perspective. And what the affirmation exercise did for me is it allowed me to zoom out on my life and see that there was so much that brought my life richness, even in the face of this news. And so, did I go to bed like thrilled that night? Of course not. But did I go to bed feeling more whole and like Maya was still intact? There was still so much to appreciate about my life. I absolutely did.
That is a good husband.
He's so wonderful. Love you, Jimmy. Shout out to Jimmy.
Okay, so Maya, it's time for the lightning round. So we have some fun questions for you,
Awesome.
a few would you rather. All I ask is that you just give the first answer pops into your head. Don't think about it. Would you rather heels or sneakers?
Oh, sneakers.
Everywhere.
I mean, literally, my nickname at the White House was Sneakers because I was the only person who wore a full business suit with trainers on my feet, with sneakers on my feet. So, yes.
So that was even before that was a thing. So that is something. Okay.
Oh, yes, they were not popular at the time, I promise you.
Okay, do you have a hidden talent?
I'm a little bit ambidextrous, so I can write. When I had my hand injury and was forced to write with my right hand in like high school, I actually did okay.
Best song to dance to, because I've seen you dancing.
Oh gosh, there's so many. CeeLo, and that PC version is Forget You.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a really good answer. Okay. Would you rather do the crosswords or Wordle?
Wordle.
Okay. What is there a must have in your morning routine?
Indian style tea.
Okay. The Bachelor or Heated Rivalry?
Oh, heated rivalry.
I just learned what that was earlier
Yeah.
today. Heated
I
Rivalry.
binged it last week. I'm like every other human, apparently.
Who would be your dream podcast guest?
Oh, this is an unsexy answer, but I actually love it when someone comes on the show who's never told their story before. They have no talking points. They haven't even processed it before, and we're working through the story out loud. I think those have been some of the most incredible interviews we've created on A Slight Change of Plans.
All right, that is a good answer. What books do you have on your nightstand or your Kindle?
Oh, one of my favorite books was someone I interviewed on A Slight Change of Plans. It's called Unfit Parent, and she is a disability advocate, and she talks about parenting with disability and the way the world can treat you in those circumstances. And it was so eye-opening. I felt very transformed reading it.
Would you rather teach your listeners something new or teach Chris Hemsworth something new?
Probably teach my listeners something new. Chris is going to be all right. I did enjoy being his brain coach for a little while there.
That's a good gig. Okay, do you have a guilty pleasure?
Of course, celebrity gossip.
Okay. What did you do with your first big paycheck?
With my first big paycheck, I treated myself to a business flight internationally.
Ah, okay, that's a
That was
good
it.
segue for us because would you rather sleep on an airplane in coach or sleep in a tent in nature?
Oh gosh, definitely sleep and coach. Yeah, me and camping, bugs, no, not happening.
Okay. What's something you've changed your mind about in the last year?
Oh, I think I went into last year thinking I was less malleable than I actually am. And I think I've had to tap into resilience that I didn't know was there. And that's been very encouraging. And again, I think it's actually partly because of the book writing process.
That is a good answer. Okay, what's the best advice you've ever been given?
My boss at the White House told me to think of myself as a policy entrepreneur. And as you can imagine, federal government entrepreneur, those words don't really go together. But it was an incredible shift in mindset around figuring out ways to overcome barriers, unlocking resources in unexpected places, and having that hustle vibe that you need to have in order to have, a startup or any kind of business succeed.
All right, the last one, two parts. What is the best investment you've ever made and the worst investment you ever made with a very broad definition of investment? Could be a class,
Yeah.
could be anything.
I'll start with worst investment so we end on a high note. Worst investment, caring what people that I shouldn't care about think. Best investment, friendship.
Two excellent answers. Maya, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Karen.
Thank you so much for taking time to listen to our conversation on how she does it. We'll have another great conversation for you soon. Until then, onward.